So thank you, Justin Robertson, producer, DJ, veteran DJ, no less. Come to talk to us about remixing. So welcome, nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We talked yesterday about this year being a bit odd. What have you been doing in this rather strange?
Yeah, it has been. It's been very strange, and obviously very disappointing not be able to play music and to people and kind of gather together as is traditional in nightclub establishments and festivals. I think that music finds a way of connecting with people, but it's difficult if you don't see people in person. We're trying ways of doing it via such things as Zoom and whatnot, but yeah, it would be nice to meet in reality fairly shortly. But I've been using the time as creatively as possible, really. I've been writing a lot of music, been writing quite a lot of literature and doing art, which is my other job. So yeah, I've made quite a lot of music over the period. Been working on a project with my wife called Former Lover, which it's been going quite well, and doing a couple of remixes, particularly at the beginning of the lockdown. Writing some new material. So yeah, hopefully get a chance to play it to people at some stage and see what the reaction is. I think that's the thing with music. Any sort of art, you can sit in your studio and make things, and you can play them to yourself and maybe the people in your household, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense until you share it with people. That's the kind of purpose of art, I think, really, is to be shared.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's some tunes that don't make any sense. You don't understand their use until they're out in front of somebody. You think, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But I'm actually going to see you tomorrow night, and we're actually going to play some in front of some people. So
real people.
Yes. So we've been sent in some questions. I'll start off. How do you get a remix? Do you ask a label or a manager, or do you have someone who manages remixes for you? So yeah, what's your process when it comes to getting a remix?
Well, I'll give you a quick potted history of myself. So when I started off at the late 80s, I was a student at Manchester University studying philosophy, and I moved to Manchester kind of at the time when, just before Acid House started, but I very much threw myself into nightclubs. And then, in the late 80s, the Acid House explosion happened, which in Manchester wasn't especially new because house music, electronic music was very much the backbone of the club scene already. So it was more like the fashions and the refreshments changed. That was the main difference. So at that stage, even though there was obviously a music industry and obviously there was such a thing as remixing had existed before, going back into time, mainly people sort of, that sort of New York disco scene, Larry Levan, Chet Pettibone and people like that. There was a definitely thriving remix scene and people had already seen the possibilities for electronic music. So that it wasn't new per se, but what was new was a kind of desire to fuse this electronic sound with all sorts of other types of records that perhaps you wouldn't have thought of sticking beats behind before. So there was a kind of frenzy to get remixes done, but there wasn't so much as it was a very loose network of people. It wasn't so much an organised industry like DJ agents or DJ managers. There were a few, but it wasn't a significant industry. I hate to use the word industry. It was a nascent community, I guess you want to say. So I kind of fell into my first remix work sort of by accident. I'm a great believer in accident, or the what James Hillman would call the intervention of my demon, the kind of fate, as it were. So when I was working at this record shop after I left university, there was a band assigned to their label called the Mad Jacks, and they had a song called Feel the Hit, which is kind of rock song, and they wanted to get a club mix done of it, and they didn't have any money. So they said, who can we get to do it? And I was just a young man working behind the records. I said, I'll do it. but I'd never been in a studio before. I didn't really know how anything worked. It was all guesswork on my part. All I knew was how I wanted it to sound. So that mix went pretty well. It was good, and it was well received, and kind of through various connections, band knew other bands, and they got me to do mixes, and then it kind of snowballed quite quickly. But what became apparent was that that network, and things have changed now because of the internet and because of social media and because of the general sort of availability of information. But at that time, it was quite hard to sort of connect with this remote entity, which was the music industry. So I contacted a guy called Jonathan Richardson, who was working or had a company called Pop Promotions, which was a record promotions company promoting promos of new releases. So because he had connections with the sort of records that I liked, he was sending me records that I was really into. I approached him, and he'd never done management before, but he sort of jumped in because he knew a lot of people at some of these labels that I didn't. So it was useful to connect with those kind of A&R people. And then, I've had a few managers since then. Nettie Walker, who I met through Bjork. I was doing stuff for Bjork. She was working for One Little Indian, I was co-managing her with Derek Burkett. So, and I currently work with a guy called Russell Brown, who helps me in music and also my art stuff as well. So I'd say currently what I do is it's a combination of the two. I don't think necessarily, especially if you're starting out, you don't necessarily need management, especially now, because the ability to contact artists directly or to contact people involved in the artist directly is there. So my advice would be, if there's something that you think that you can add something to, and if there's a project that looks interesting, and the key being that you hear a piece of music, you think, I could add an interpretation of this piece of music that would be interesting. I think that's the key. If you think that you find such a piece of music, then I don't think there's anything wrong with just contacting the artist and see what comes out of it, because I've done that in the past. I've done that recently. Sometimes they tell you to go away and never darken our doorstep again, but most of the time they're kind of open to the idea, especially if you can kind of articulate what it is that you find interesting in their piece of music. It's quite nice to have that kind of feedback. Where a manager is useful, particularly in my case, is business end of things, because I am in the habit of negotiating myself into terrible positions. I'm the only person who will go to a market and haggle the price up from the price given by the trader. So I need help in that department because I'm not very good at it. So it is useful, and often it's useful to tap into a network of people that you don't necessarily have access to. But there is a lot you can do yourself. I wouldn't, because obviously you have to give away usually about 20% of your earnings to a manager. So it's definitely something you want to consider carefully before jumping in, and also be aware of people promising you the earth and they can't really deliver anything. So my advice would be take it as it comes, really, just kind of, but maybe make some initial forays yourself. I think people are receptive, surprisingly receptive to direct communication.
Great. Thank you, Justin. And when you begin doing a remix, how do you start? I mean, do you like to, and this is another question I'm reading out. So there's when you begin the remix, how do you start? Do you like to remix the whole song or just use a little? So, I mean, you know what they're getting at. Some people actually like the song to end up still sounding like the song, but more often get it. And then some people bin everything, just keep like a fraction of a vocal sample, you know?
I think both approaches are valid. But what I think the key is, as I alluded to in the last answer, was that I think the important thing is that you add something to it, or you add a new interpretation of that piece of music. So I think if you're just adding a very subtle change to a great song, then perhaps it's not of so much value. I think a rap doesn't have to be insanely radical, but I think a new interpretation of that song is kind of essential to me. If someone asks me to remix one of my records, I like it when they destroy it. Yeah, all my hard work comes to nothing. Someone just rips it apart and sends me back something unrecognizable. I quite like that, to be honest, because it's someone's heard an element in that music that they think, I like that, this is interesting, I can develop this. And sometimes you don't have much say in, I was talking about the hand of fate. Sometimes when you're working on a remix, you don't have much choice what direction it takes you in directions that you weren't expecting. You had this idea that you were going to do, I don't know, a symphonic string laden trance number, and it comes out being a drum track with a, you know, distorted pitch down vocal. Sometimes the direction it takes is not what you expect it to, and it's very important, I think, to follow that. Follow your instincts and follow where the music takes you, rather than trying to force something.
That's a good point. We spoke yesterday a bit about, so we mentioned Ghosts in the Machine, but those happy accidents that can completely change direction of the song, and is that something that people should
embrace,
be aware of? Yeah,
and definitely. I mean, sometimes, now kind of, you know, music technology is relatively efficient, so things tend to work. But still, like, glitches and mistakes happen. You know, you might be trying to quantize something in a particular way and it comes out all wonky and strange, and that's when it throws up interesting things. Oh my, that's interesting, and it'll take you off at an entirely different path. So, I mean, I think remixing in its purest form should be allowing for anything. You know, if you end up just with a snare drum or something like that, if that's the direction the song's taking you, and then I think that's completely valid. Other times you'll get, I mean, obviously when I work with people like Bjork, her vocal is it's so amazing that all I wanted to do was create a different vehicle for that vocal, you know, that was front and center. What I added was, you know, peripheral to that amazing voice, but I wanted to add a different tone to what was going on underneath her amazing vocals. So, I think definitely, just follow your instincts, really. But I think the key being add your own personality to it, add something new to it, and something exciting, and maybe a possibility that the artist hasn't seen, or bringing out something that's hidden within the track.
Great. And following on from that, kind of similar strand, but this is from Standard Zimmer at Radio 1, very important station in Prague. Which of all remixes do you value most? And thinking about this, you've remixed some really big names, but it's not necessarily the big names that you're going to value most. But anyway, yeah.
Well, I don't know really. I'm really very critical of my work. I'm always kind of like trying to. It's a constant learning process, making music. You never get to the end. It's like a diploma you'll never finish. Sorry, students. You're never going to get that diploma. But it's a constant learning process. So, I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing artists who's, you know, Bjork just mentioned. So my work doing Sugar Cubes and the Bjork mix I'm very pleased with, and then when I was doing Lion Rock, working with someone like MC Busby, who's an incredible talent, incredible songwriter. So again, I'm just trying to enhance their genius, really. I kind of bow down to their greater genius and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of happy with those, but I think that some of the stuff I've done recently I'm very happy with. PBR Street Gang, Noel Gallagher remix I did recently. I've just done my D-Ream, which I've turned into a 8-minute dub extravaganza. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with the direction things have taken recently. Just to feel a bit more focused, and after many years of trying to learn my trade, I feel like I sort of vaguely know what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with recent things, and over the years there've been some good moments I'm happy with. Some I still play in nightclubs. So, but again, it's best to be slightly dissatisfied with everything, and then you seek to improve it, and then, you know, criticism of yourself is good. I think. I mean, not too Don't get too critical. Otherwise you
don't stop doing
into
it.
depression.
Oh God, it's awful.
Oh no, I give up now. But I mean, that is part of the process. I mean, going back to sort of talk about remixing, frustration is a very big part of the process, because you are going to hit it constantly. You know, you'll sit there 2 days into a project and go, what am I doing? How is this going to work out? But you need to get over that kind of doubt, because something good will emerge at the end.
And do you think, I mean, you know, everybody who's involved in music constantly revisits things going, yeah, I can improve that. But I mean, do you have stuff that's out and already, but you know you're going to play it again and you hear something that you could improve? So you improve it, obviously not necessarily to release, but for you to play out again?
No, I don't actually. I'm very much like capture a snapshot in time. I mean, I think that's the thing about music. It evolves and changes, and it's sometimes good to revisit. I mean, I've revisited a couple of old tracks, like remixed a couple of old Lion Rock tracks when they got reissued a few years ago. But generally, I don't know. Generally, I kind of like, that was a statement at the time. Sometimes I regret some of the musical decisions I might have made, and sometimes I'm like, oh, you know, when people bring up, I really like that mix you did. Oh. But that's life, isn't it? There's mistakes. There's that you can't put out 100% bangers. Sometimes there's going to be a few duff ones in there, but that's cool. I think that's all right, you know. And other times you do things and you think you've no idea how you did it. You have absolutely no idea how you might go back in the studio and try and recreate that, and you can't. So it's like capturing the moment, really.
Talking of Lion Rock, question from Standard Radio 1 again, say, is Lion Rock a closed chapter or a subject to revival consideration? Any chance that you go back to Lion Rock?
No, I don't think so. I like moving on, really. I like to kind of change things. One of the things I really don't like has been hemmed in and being easily defined. So I like to sort of, that's why I very rarely use my name when making music, because I really hate the idea of becoming a product of any description or a brand. It's a very sort of now way of describing yourself, especially the DJ thing, you know, logo and the brand of ex DJ and producer. I don't really like that at all. I like the freedom to change and not be easily defined. So I usually use different monikers: Lion Rock, Revtone. My current project, which I've been doing for quite a few years now, is the Deadstock 33s. Former Lover, which is me and my wife, so that's kind of 50-50. It's not me, not 100% me anyway. But yeah, I like to kind of create these new identities. So Lion Rock was definitely something that was, I did literally last century, so in a different millennia, yes. In fact, not just last century. So yeah, I'm not so keen on time travel in that respect. Having said that, so Roger Lyons, who is my partner in Lion Rock for many years, and MC Busby, who I talked about earlier, who's a genius songwriter, they are working together on a new project, which is very, very good. So I've been asked to do a remix for that project. So it's kind of almost like a Lion Rock reunion, but under a different name. And I think we talked about maybe doing some music together in the future. But in my mind, it would be something entirely new.
Great. Another question from Jan Novak, who's a DJ and techno producer in the Czech Republic. Question from Mark. Question mark on Justin. Just, what do you think in the time of COVID, the situation will change the shape of clubs? So what do you think?
Yeah,
the effect of COVID is going to have on clubbing as we come back out of the pandemic? I mean, obviously now there are ways of doing it. Those restrictions will change, but what do you think there'll be a longer change?
Well, yeah, this is a very vexed question, and it kind of gets the very heart of what music, I mean, nightclubs and electronic music, but music in general, what is it? What is its function in human society? One of the things I really liked about acid house that's sometimes forgotten with all this kind of DJ culture, this DJ kind of superstar culture that's unfortunately grown up, in my opinion. When acid house first started, what was interesting about it for me, it was very different from rock and roll, where the DJ was like a respected figure, but like a kind of background figure who was playing music, directing a kind of ritual that was happening in the club. So if you look at early footage of raves and early acid house clubs, no one's looking at the DJ, they're all looking at each other. They're all kind of connecting with each other. And that's kind of changed slightly now with this looking towards a stage with DJ standing there doing God knows what, firing confetti out of a cannon or something, you know. But in the early days, it was very much, it was different. It was more about a communal experience. So, and that's kind of the key, I think, to music. It's like people getting together and sharing experiences together. Sometimes, you know, obviously loud music you can't necessarily hear, but it's like a sort of ritual experience, a kind of quasi-religious thing. And obviously going back in history, you know, human beings have always gathered together, drank intoxicants and danced around, you know, whether it be like a fire in a cave or a nightclub or a festival. So COVID's thrown out a really difficult situation because obviously people can't do that at the moment safely. You know, I think it's right that people should try and keep safe and not want to sort of harm each other by unnecessarily, you know, getting into dangerous situations. So how would it? I think electronic music's made, you know, big attempts to try and keep the community alive, and I think those are really admirable. You know, discussions like this, club sets being streamed, and little communities growing up online where you can kind of DJ can play and the community can chat to each other. I think that's really interesting and admirable. But I do think that the key is still people physically getting together. So it's throwing up a lot of challenges, and maybe, you know, the vaccine, when these sort of things happen, we can open up again safely, then that will provide a route back for people. That's what I'm hopeful of, because I do think it's important that people can physically get together to share that experience, really. So, but you know, on the positive side, it has thrown up some interesting ideas, and I think also maybe in a good way, it has thrown that idea of community and the audience and the people together. I don't want to call it audience, the collective of people. They are the important aspect of electronic music, not the DJ, not the artists. Though, you know, they are important, they have their role to play, but it's more, it shows the importance of a community of people getting together, not someone grandstanding on a stage. It's more about the people, really. So I think COVID's really focused the importance of that idea, really.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and totally, you know, agree with all those things. I mean, it was the whole, and I remember it being a real struggle, you know, in the late 90s, where there became a requirement for DJs to start appearing on the stage because the whole scene had obviously turned into something much bigger. But it's a difficult question for people to get their heads around, because the DJ wasn't supposed to be that kind of act. It's supposed to be on the floor with everybody else, you know.
Exactly, yeah. And I always find it really. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can wave my hands around with the best of them when I've asked to. But yeah, I do. Yeah. I do feel a bit uncomfortable because I'm not really doing anything. I'm playing other people's music. Usually, I'm enjoying myself. But who wants to see me enjoying myself? You know. So yeah, I think.
Another question here from Camille Warm, who's another DJ Kamuza. I would like to ask him what he thinks the development will have on the source of income in electronic music. And he goes on to say it wasn't particularly about the sale of music itself. It was around live fees and gigs, and obviously that income has gone.
Yeah.
So what do you think there is in terms of sources of revenue for artists now with
in a COVID situation.
In a COVID, and you know, it might take a while for things to swing back. You know, even when audiences are allowed to come back in, there's going to be potentially, you know, a lot of reticence from the audience. So
that is a knotty problem. I'm not an expert on streaming services, but it does seem that the streaming model for music is something that's prevalent and here to stay. I mean, I think there's lots of things that go on in parallel. So there'll always be a reasonable audience for physical products, like creating, pressing up vinyl and selling it to record shops are still thriving. So there is a way of creating a cottage industry of a physical product. Though I hate to call it product, physical things. But, you know, that requires quite a lot of investment. You have to create an audience, and it's not guaranteed, and you can also lose a lot of money. So there are risks attached to that. So there is still that possibility, especially dance music. There's a real love of records, you know. So there is a way of keeping that kind of thing alive. Streaming services. I mean, I think the music industry, the trouble with the music industry, and maybe capitalism in general, is that it's not really known for its fairness. It's like it operates this kind of semi-feudal kind of system where the big artists seem to make the most money, and everyone else, like the musical serfs below, get the scraps from the table, you know. So, but I think what's happened with the COVID situation, the same way we previously said about focusing it more on the audience, is that also I think there's an idea of, well, everyone in lockdown, we've got to have music, otherwise we're going to go, it's not going to be good for our mental health to not have this sort of musical entertainment. It really focuses how important music is to everybody, and that maybe that there is an idea of a certain fairness in redistribution of the income. It is what's needed to keep the artists that we need alive, you know, and thriving, and give people the incentive to create new exciting music so that we can all be entertained by it. Because obviously the consumption and appreciation of music is thriving. It's just the model is still semi-feudal, as I said. It's still kind of very old-fashioned. But I do feel like there are possibilities within even the streaming model. I think there is possibilities of a new, fairer system emerging with, if people just want it to happen, and more conservative forces relinquish their control over it.
I think the absolutely, and the COVID pandemic and people being given some space to communicate has actually allowed lots of voices to start coming through, discussing exactly these kind of areas. I mean, one of the things I heard discussed recently, which would be good to have your opinion on, is the fact that as a new artist, you can now go through Bandcamp and you can get stuff into streaming services and see an economic return. Whereas in the old days, you had to find somewhere to print up your white label, take that round to loads of shops, go back 3 months later and get a tenner.
Or get the box back. Actually, no, I should have mentioned Bandcamp, because Bandcamp's amazing. I mean, I would probably say I do 2 radio shows, right? One called The Temple of Wonders. It's kind of psychedelic world music and dub and stuff like that. And then the other is called Rotating Institute, which is more electronic stuff. And I'd say that 80%, 90% even of the music I play on those 2 shows, I get from Bandcamp. So, you know, it's very reasonable prices, good, really good platform. So yes, that I think should have mentioned that Bandcamp's an excellent way of getting your music out there. It's a really good community. I love it. I mean, I love it. Probably have all the digital music platforms, and obviously you can buy physical product through them as well. You can buy the vinyl and merchandise and whatnot for it. So Bandcamp's fantastic.
Presumably people can find your stuff on Bandcamp as well, yeah? Yes,
they can, ladies and gentlemen, but formerlover.com. But it's, yes, they can. Well, actually, they can buy Former Lover stuff on Bandcamp, but there's no Justin Robertson. I'm only a consumer currently on there, but I am looking up setting up a Bandcamp page at some stage. But yeah, and it's one of those ones that's a really exciting platform to get lost in. You can go down weird wormholes and find some very strange stuff. just by giving yourself an afternoon to flow through the world of interesting music.
Good point. Yeah, you need to give yourself some time.
So I guess you're right that there are possibilities now as a new emerging artist to reach people that before you would have had to go try and get a record deal, and then all the having been signed to several record companies and major record companies, it's a headache. It's not. I think sometimes when you're young, you sign a record deal and you think, this is it, I've arrived. It's not. It's quite grim in certain aspects. The respect for artists is quite low in the sort of lot. I mean, I had quite good experiences up to some extent, but then also some bad ones. But there is you do have an opportunity to reach an audience yourself directly, which is one that it's just, I don't know what people, it's hard to, it's tough. It's really tough. There's obviously a lot of music out there. So how to get your head above the parapet and get people to hear it is difficult. Again, that gets back to the key of all music is that a good idea, a passionate delivery of a good idea will see you right. A mediocre kind of can't be asked functional piece of music will probably will find it difficult to emerge from the melee.
Cool. Well, this is a good time then probably to move on to a slightly different area, but this is quite specific, so I'll broaden it out. The question is, which according to him is the best preamp and mic? Thought of as high tech. So that obviously, what kind of mics do you use? But maybe broaden that a bit. Kind of, are there bits of hardware and software that you're particularly attached to?
Well, my piece of advice when it comes to technology, I mean, I've been doing this for ages, 30 odd years. And weirdly enough, I'm not that interested in the technology of it. I'm not really, I don't pore over magazines and go on forums about technology. I very much believe in using what you've got, or finding a setup that you're, I was going to say comfortable with, maybe uncomfortable with, but just kind of using what's at hand rather than sort of fetishizing. Like, I mean, you see kind of sometimes these pictures of studios with ranks and racks and racks of ancient, expensive synthesizers, and people who collect obsessively, the latest gear or whatever. And that's all great. There's some brilliant pieces of equipment out there and brilliant pieces of, software that you can use without a doubt. But like some of those early, well, I say acid house was made for a bassline machine that no one knew how to use, a cheap kind of bassline machine misused by people, a drum machine. That's all it was. 303, 909, 808, whatever. Or going back to early music, kind of like banging a tin can, banging a saucepan and singing along, or having a 2-string guitar you found in a dump. Like you can create magic out of anything, out of rubbish. So I think you don't want to fall into the trap of feeling like you have to have the most expensive, the top of the range piece of equipment to make good music, because you don't. In answer to the question directly, I use an old Rode microphone, which is lurking somewhere behind me, and I go into my Sapphire sound card, but it's not the greatest microphone. It's really cheap, but I've used it for 20 odd years, because I know what it does, and I know what its pitfalls of using it are, and I know how to compensate for it. And I don't have like a posh vocal booth. As you see, the books and records behind me are my sound baffle, and I've got 2 dogs, so recording vocals is particularly difficult, because when the post arrives, they go completely nuts. So I'm constantly having to stop recording, or if they come in for their dinner, like they jump up and they're in my face. So there are some amazing microphones of Neumann mics and stuff like that, and occasionally I'll go use my friend's studio down the road if I'm if a vocalist of certain caliber comes in, and I don't want them to me to embarrass myself by getting to record in my spare room, which is my studio, then I might borrow a vocal booth with my friends. Again, I guess it's sort of depending also what sort of music you're making and what you're trying to do. I mean, I make quite lo-fi grungy music, so I'm happy for the vocal sound to be a little bit raw, because I know kind of how to make it sound how I want it to sound. But if you want a really clear pop delivery, then yeah, it might be worth investing in a decent microphone, or just getting to know all your equipment and getting to know how it works. I mean, I did one session out. I was stuck somewhere and I needed to record something, and I just recorded it through my computer speakers.
Yeah,
because that's all I had. I had to do it, and it was something I was doing. So I just sang into my computer. It sounded great. I was really pleased with the results, but you know, it wasn't the polished piece of music that I was trying to achieve.
Well, I think that's all really good points. I remember talking to Prince Thomas about a remix, beautiful remix he did of the Chemical Brothers track, and I just happened to see him somewhere, and I went, "It's amazing," and he went, "Yeah, it started because I found this really rubbish kick drum sound," and he based the whole remix around because it sounded so rubbish, you know. Those early acid house tunes, quite often it's that rawness to the kick drum that makes the whole thing propel, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially those early days. This is what I mean. You can get obsessed by like it's consumerism. It's total fetishism of bits of equipment. And I mean, I do certain. I've got my old guitar. I love my old guitar. You know, I do attach to certain bits of stuff. But generally, I think you know, you can hear amazing things made with just the cheapest, crappiest bits of equipment. Sometimes they sound the best, you know. As well as kind of a popular recording your sort of bin going down the stairs, or kind of like. I did a project with a few years ago, which we haven't finished yet, but with Daniel Avery. And one of the things we set ourselves to do, we both emailed each other and said, "Go outside now with your phone and record the first 5 things you hear. And we'll make a track out of that." So yeah, that was an interesting experiment. It's amazing stuff. So I got sound of my dog's nose, him breathing, you know, things like that. So sometimes the sounds you hear outside, the natural sounds, can be quite interesting. So my answer to the question is, there definitely are some amazing bits of equipment, but you don't need them to make.
And also, thank you for pointing out the second beautiful use for vinyl, which is fantastic sound insulation. You know,
yes,
a room with 4 walls of vinyl around you don't need anything else.
Absolutely, yeah.
So thank you for that. How does he work with the author of a song, or with the label and the author, especially when remixing world famous names? So yeah, do you interact with the artist, the original artist, when you're making a track?
Not sometimes. I mean, more, in recent times, more so, because it's quite often the artist might approach you directly. I mean, in the case of Noel, he literally sent me a text message saying, "Do you fancy remixing this record?" And then, so
for the High Flying Birds,
yeah. So sometimes it's a personal message. And normally people contact you because they know what you do and they like what you do and they want you to do whatever you want. So I kind of like to be given free rein and like to be trusted in doing something, because I'm like, okay, I'll do my best. Whatever you give me, I'll do my very, very best, and hopefully you'll like it. Some artists I've met in the past have not liked what I've done to their music, and have told me so in very blunt terms. I mean, there is a time, you know, sometimes major labels used to sort of have that thing where an A&R person would wade in and get you to do something, and the artist wouldn't be that into having a remix done, or didn't really want it done, and are very precious about certain things. And I was very not precious about their music. I'd like to take it apart and kind of annihilate it and make something new out of it. So some people don't appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Understandably.
Well, yeah, but they've asked for a remix, you know.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I think people just let you do what you want, and I think that's the understanding. That should be the understanding about remixing. I think really that you're there to add your interpretation and should be given the freedom to do so.
Sure. I mean, have you found, because some genres are more open to remixes. You know, if there's a pop single, then they tend to get remixed a lot, so it's not unexpected. But some genres are less, and you work across loads of genres. So have you found that some artists have been surprised just because they're not really aware of what a remix is or what it does, because it doesn't come into their world, whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, not so much now, I think, because I think that it's been so well established. But yes, there are a lot of people who come from a totally different, and they're really excited by hearing their music in a totally different way, and they're hearing them out in a club or whatnot, hearing their music sort of mangled through various machines. I think a lot of people are very, very excited by it, and people you might not expect to kind of sort of trad rockers are really into it.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I think if you're asking someone to do a remix, then you need to sort of relinquish. You need to sort of free it up and let it go out into the world and see what comes out at the end without being too precious about it. And I think if you approach someone to say, "Here are my parameters. This is what we want a remix doing, but you must fulfill this point, this point, this point," then it's not something I'm interested in, really. But that's for remixing. There are occasions where in the world of work of music that you might be asked to do, say if you might be asked to make some music for an advert, say, or a computer game or something like that, which is does happen. That's a slightly different brief where people want your creativity and your uniqueness, but they also kind of want it's doing a job. So then you might have to bend a little. I find doing those projects sometimes quite frustrating.
Well, the next question might relieve you of those duties, which is a complimentary. Sorry, no, that one. How does he see the rapid implementation of AI in the creation process? Will it be more towards diversity and originality, or will it just improve and accelerate mainstream pop production? So will it funnel stuff into everything sounding the same, or do you think AI could create a broader sound palette?
Well, I'll first add the heavy caveat that I'm no expert in AI by any means at all. But my understanding of artificial intelligence is that it's. I think there's a lot of claims made for AI, particularly in people working in the field, that are fantastical and possibly unrealistic. I mean, the idea that the machines will sort of become conscious and somehow will be dominated under their robot yoke, I think is somewhat far-fetched. I mean, AI is an interpretation of human thought. It's a kind of it's created by people and interprets human kind of references. So I wouldn't be too worried about trying to replace ingenuity. I mean, there's always been sort of formulas in if this going back before AI. There's formulaic pop music, formulaic kind of easy listening music. There was, Tin Pan Alley songwriters who just had like a formula for a good time record, and they wrote these songs, and musicians would churn them out, and they become hits. There's always been like Hit Factory, Stock Aitken Walkman. There's always been formulas for pop music, and AI is no different from that. It's just a sort of maybe slightly more efficient way of interpreting those patterns, but they are human patterns. So yeah, sure, it might accelerate the creation of generic pop music, but generic pop music's always been here. So I'm not worried. I mean, sort of music that I like is generally created by maniacs, and is often very strange. I mean, who knows? AI could probably help in that process. But I think that at the end of the day, AI is it's a tool of interpreting weird human ideas. So I would say use that tool if you think it's valuable, and you think it helps, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Formulaic, the idea that all music suddenly going to become formulaic and bland, and I don't think will happen. There's enough rebels out there who refuse to fall under the robot yoke.
I've got now a question based around a quote from Emmanuel Begund, which is, music has a fundamental importance in the evolution of humanity, and it says it's posted on Friday the 2nd October 2020 at 13:48, so just very precise. Music is a vital need, according to Emmanuel Begund, research professor in cognitive neuroscience at the University of Burgundy. So I think this question is really about the role of music in educational development, and also, as we just talked about, as a means of expression. And during the question, the questioner asked about the way that authoritarian regimes clamp down on music for that reason. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on the quote, really?
Yeah, I mean, music is one of the aspects of the world, the universe that surrounds us, reality that surrounds us, that lifts human life above the absurd. It's Schopenhauer thought it was the kind of essence of will, the essence of being. And I think Nietzsche called it life without music would be a mistake. So. And it's not just human beings. There's music everywhere. The bark of a dog, the whistle of a bird, the creak of a tree. There's music and sound all around us. And I think the appreciation of music is where you connect with that reality around you. It's a direct link to the kind of essence of things around you, away from the kind of petty human squabbling and the kind of day-to-day functional needs that society throws up. So music's like a transcendent experience. It connects you to a greater reality. So it wouldn't be surprising that totalitarian regimes would want to suppress that kind of connection, because I think that when groups of people, as we discussed earlier about where the COVID future of music, when groups of people get together and involve themselves in kind of ritual activities, they often come up with some ideas that are dangerous and uncomfortable for regimes of a totalitarian bent. So yeah, I think music is essential to, I wouldn't even focus necessarily on humanity. Human beings are very warlike and destructive and troublesome species. But I think there is a potential within our troublesome nature to evolve into something more benign, and to kind of start fitting into the web that we are involved in, and not stand outside it, as we kind of tend to do. We human beings tend to discuss nature and the world as if we're not animals, and we're not part of it. And I think what music does is appreciation. It connects you back into that, into that, trying to sound too hippie and cosmic about it. It does connect you back into nature, and I think that's the key in the question asked about human evolution. If human beings are to become anything than a destructive force in the world, then music is one of those ways that it can connect to that greater reality and perhaps create something more beautiful out of it.
What a nice way to finish. It's good to see you. Yeah, man. It's good stuff. So I don't want to belittle it at all. It's a really nice finish. And also, just to draw a conclusion to us meeting it Sunday morning in the times of COVID, it wouldn't have happened before the times of COVID on Sunday morning at 10:30.
No, that's true. Yeah. Or I'd still be up. It would be a slightly less attractive face.
I'll see you tomorrow in Hackney for some music.
Brilliant.
Great. Take care. Thanks a lot, mate. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Is that all good, Ben?